So thank you for joining us today. We're excited to get started. We'll start with just some introductions. We do have one more panelist joining us, so please don't be too surprised or disrupted when he gets here to join us on stage. We'll make sure to give him a warm welcome then. My name is Megan Petrini, and I am the CEO of Petrini L&D, L&D for Learning and Development. I've been in a couple of different organizations, but most of my background is in corporate America, and I'm excited to share some of the mistakes and valuable lessons that I've been able to witness and learn firsthand as well. And I will hand it over.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Kirti Srinivas. I serve as the Senior Director of Bioprocess Development in a cell-cultured seafood company called Blue Nalu, located in San Diego, California. I lead a team of scientists and engineers. We are very focused on producing healthy and nutritious seafood products from fish cells. What we are really looking to do is basically creating an ethical, more sustainable, and resilient supply chain around the seafood products. And we use the art of biotechnology, well-known approaches in food fermentation and biotech to convert the cells from a fish into very consistent, and that's where we differentiate ourselves with, very consistent and healthy and nutritious food choices so that future generations can enjoy seafood without a compromise. I come from a very technical background and converted into or transitioned into a leadership position over time. So that's where most of my learnings come from, because as you transition from a very individual contributor technical side role, and now you're trying to start leading up not just a project or a goal, but a team of scientists and engineers who are all very, very motivated, but at the same time very skilled and very talented. You learn a lot. And then sometimes you learn that from doing mistakes, and sometimes you learn it by making decisions and trying to navigate around the problems and take them to be opportunities. So that's kind of like where my position comes from. So really nice to see you all, and really appreciate CXO 2.0 conference for the opportunity to participate in this panel.
So I think we could start probably with what are some of the biggest mistakes that we've seen when organizations are first starting out. So in particular, startups. So one of the best examples that comes to mind when we're thinking about startups that had a lot of potential and kind of failed spectacularly in a public forum is WeWork. So if everyone is familiar with WeWork, started out with a lot of potential, a lot of promise, right? And it is widely recognized as one of the biggest startup failures. Still a couple of them around, still going strong, but they had to kind of revamp their entire leadership. Hi, please join us. Thank you. Welcome. I think we need a microphone.
Yeah,
oh.
Getting one.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. My apologies for being late.
That's okay.
I wasn't aware I was supposed to be here.
Okay. That's okay. You're a busy man, we know. Please welcome Alan L. Krishnan, President of Team Up Corp. Incorporated. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Alan Krishnan, and as the MC announced, I am President Founder of Team Up Corp. And what we do is help organizations grow. It can be corporate, nonprofit, educational, homeowners association, anything. Many of them are startups. Many of them make mistakes. So I have a lot of experience, and I hope I can share something of value. Thank you.
Awesome, great job. So I was just sharing how there's a really big example of mistakes that startups that have made mistakes, and that's WeWork. Not looking at something quite that big, but in my experience, one of the biggest mistakes that I have seen startups make is that they grow faster than the culture. The business grows faster than the culture, and it's so important to make sure that you have the right people in the right roles. So, for the two of you, what is some advice or examples that you have of when we were able to get people in the right roles, or when we weren't able to get people in the right roles, or be very deliberate or thoughtful about that? What were some of the negative effects that happened?
Uh, so, me, I, so when you're working with fields of sustainability fields, there's a lot of people who want to be part of it. The mission drives the purpose, right? In which case, I think technically, even though a lot of the things that we are trying to do, we reform to using known, established, safe, and things that people know are very comfortable with. Sometimes they don't work out with the same way as we try to achieve the goals. So we have specific metrics and everything to achieve. And what happens is we encounter failures. Setting the stage up where we get the right team people in on it. So large people who come from large multinational organizations where they're dedicated to do a certain job, a certain role, or they're building their expertise in a certain field. It in a startup, you're usually required to wear multiple hats. Yeah, because you're very resource limited. You don't like to Megan's point, you don't want to grow too fast. You can't really fill every single position because there are certain things you got to achieve before you fill other departments. And what happens is that really puts a lot of people who come from large organizations in a bind where they're like, oh, but I'm used to having this support and that support and that support. And without that support, they actually start to not shine the way that they expect to shine. And that's where the leadership, startup leadership needs to kind of build that expectation and accountability in a very, very critical manner, or else what we see is we see a lot of things failing, and especially in the industry that I'm in, which is the cultivated meat industry. I mean, there's a lot of things 3 or 4 years back, there were a lot of promises made. They keep making promises. And it's basically as the research involved, as the manufacturing involved, I think now we are in a lot better place than we used to be. But that being said, those mistakes really almost cost the alternate protein industry in a negative manner. That kind of forced only the more mature, more resilient teams to stay back and fight the fight.
This is a tough act to follow. He covered just about everything one can think of, and now I really got to think out of the box and see what can I add to what he said. So let me start with one of the most famous companies in the world, which probably has done more to change human life than most others, Microsoft. Startup some many, many decades ago, Bill Gates, the genius innovator thinking. The great part is, yes, he knew he had to wear many hats, but he knew which hats he cannot wear effectively. He recruited his buddy, Steve Ballmer, to come and work with him. And thanks to Steve, Bill Gates was able to take Microsoft to the heights it went. So this is the first mistake most startup entrepreneurs do. They think, hey, I started this, you didn't. So obviously I know more than you do. And I'm better than you, of course. Mm-hmm. And that is the wrong attitude. Every person you get into your startup is more valuable than the person you marry. Because at least when you get married, you have boundaries within which you live. In a startup, you don't. So you need to respect everyone and bring in the right people so that things will really grow. I've spoken to 3-4 startups here at the conference, and they're doing wonderfully in certain areas, but other areas, they're totally weak. And what most startups don't realize is you are the innovator, you're the entrepreneur, great ideas. You have the courage or a rich parent and family, or a very dedicated, trusting, loving spouse who makes good money and supports you. Therefore, you become the entrepreneur and startup founders. Wonderful to say, I'm a founder. Or I may compromise and say, I'm a co-founder. But it's more sexy to say, I'm founder. What people do not realize is those are big shoes to fill. And I've got phenomenal ideas. If you just gave me $1 for an idea, I'll be a millionaire by now. But ideas don't translate to money. And more important, even when you make the phenomenal product, the development is maybe 20, 30% of the total cost. 70, 80% is marketing and sales. You got to get somebody willing to buy what you have to sell, and reaching out is a crap shot. It's like, taking a 12-bore gun and just firing in the air and hoping some bird gets hit. There's no guarantee it'll hit. Or a better thing, shoot it in a mango tree and hope that some mango will fall down so you can grab a mango. And that's what most people don't realize. So the first thing a startup needs to do is find a great marketing person. And that cannot be a finance person, because finance people are all, hardcore, inflexible. Marketing is full of hot air. No disrespect to anybody in marketing, but that is harsh reality. And I learned this early in my life because I was doing a graduate school MBA in India, and my accounting professor kicked me out of class and said, "You'd better not come here again." And I said, "My God, what did I do wrong?" He said, "It's because you already know more accounting than you need to know, so don't come here again. Don't waste your time. Go instead and study marketing, because that is rare for an accounting person to have. To be strong in finance, accounting, and in marketing and sales," he said, "is almost impossible to find, so follow that path." Thanks to him, which I followed his advice, of course, I believe I'm one of the rare combinations who do this. And so I'm telling you from experience. If you have a startup in mind, or anybody has a startup in mind, make sure they have a strong marketing person to take them forward.
Great job. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the insights. I really want to touch on also how you said that when it's a startup, then you have to wear a lot of different hats, but you also need to make sure that the right people are wearing the right hats. Fun side story. I once worked for an organization as a startup where the president was finance and legal and HR, and said in a meeting, "If you have any HR issues, just come to me." And that was when I knew I can't work at this organization anymore, because we weren't getting the right people in the right roles. And to your point about Microsoft, you can't fill every open role, right? You're going to spread yourself too thin. And that's not where your expertise lies. Great points. All right, so the next topic of discussion for this with mistakes that startup make. I know for me, when I'm starting my business and any other organization that I'm working for, it's really important to me that my values, my personal values, align and match with the values of the organization. You can't do that if you don't know what the values are of that particular organization. So for you two, could you take a moment to kind of talk about, in the startup arena, how important or valuable it is to talk about core values and get those identified and defined?
That's a perfect point. Blue Nalu, 3 years back, we had the same discussion. We were in a startup. We were in 3 years into our company. The leadership came down and said, "You know what? We need to create a centralized thought process." I think the core values, that's what it gives. It's not just the branding. It's not just, it's basically creating the culture. This is the expectation. One of the things that we have created, and you can surely, I invite everyone to go up online and see, we have published it in our online website, our core values of being epicurious, because we are a food company, and it is important to be scientifically, but not only scientifically, but food curious. Be bold, as in we're changing the thought process. We need to be we are providing sustainable, ethical alternatives. But you can't do that if you're not being a lighthouse. And eventually you can't do it alone. So what we established is being true blue. That's like our core value in Blue Nalu, is to be collaborative. Listen, it's part of listening and telling, because it's important to understand what the concerns are of the customers, of the employees, of the teams, the technical, the non-technical, the marketing, the sales. Core values, once we established it, it created that central, I would say, neural system that is part of our thought process. So when, for example, in a very, very simplistic format, in team check-ins, when we are hitting a problem, and then the team, and I mean, mature people, senior level personnel with lot of life experience, they usually take a problem, they take failures, they convert it to opportunities, move forward. But younger generations, they find it hard to do that. So the central nervous system, what gives us this opportunity to say, oh, you have this problem, try being bold. Try that, and what when you're being bold, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Ideas come out of it. So having the core values, even if it's early on in the startup, it creates that culture. It creates that background, and it creates the basis of what is important for the company and the mission that it's trying to drive.
Awesome. Thank you.
That is key. Since we talked of the core values, it all begins with you want to be a founder of an organization. The first thing you need to do is there's somebody who has a need, and what you have in mind will fulfill that need. As I told you, if every idea I had, give me $1, I'd be a millionaire. Thank God I didn't follow those ideas. I'll probably bankrupt and owe 200 millions to some people. So the key is, where is a need, and how does your solution fill this need? Companies I have advised, we've blown $1 million pursuing the dream of an employee who said, oh, I want to do this, did this, and nothing came out of it. Because the commitment was not there, the need was not validated, and made a whole bunch of mistakes. So the first thing you need is find a problem in your environment where you live, work, see, walk, read, whatever, it doesn't matter, and see how you can fill it. For example, a core value I have is to help other people. And today, when I had a quick lunch, the gentleman sitting beside me, they have a company, startup. They're just getting into the market. And what they do is remote diagnostics. I think it's a safe assumption that the majority of the people in this room live very far from their parents or grandparents. And you have no idea how their lives are going on a moment. They have the technology where they will be monitored, vital signs taken periodically, timely, and outcomes communicated to you immediately, so you know if there is a crisis. My wife had to have a pacemaker about 6-7 months ago, and that technology, that company, is constantly monitoring how the heart is doing, and if something misbehaves through Bluetooth and wireless technology, their servers come to know it. They would notify 911 wherever my wife is, not necessarily at home. She can be at work, she can be in any part of the United States, and the 911 will go there and pick her up and say, ma'am, you need help, let me take you to the hospital. That's awesome. That's awesome. Even before she knows she is in trouble, which quite often in cardiac cases is the case, the system will take her there. And there's another young woman I met here. She runs a company on tutoring. Tutoring is extremely unaffordable in most environments. In the United States, it's between $75 and $150 an hour. I was in India a few months ago. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Indian economy, but actually, I can hire a clerical assistant for about 300,000 rupees a year, which translates to 25,000 rupees a month. And I saw a sign, 25 rupees a month for tutoring per subject for a child for 1 hour. So 1 hour tutoring of a child is costing 25,000 rupees, which I believe is unaffordable, but there are some people who can pay. But that's not the market we are interested in. That's not the market that Swapna is interested in her company Evolve. They are evolving tutoring that can go. And I met somebody else who has an AI solution for tutoring. Again, fantastic. So these are the kind of things we need. Identify a pain point which is definite and see how you can fill it. Your widget needs to be better than what is there. Pricing should be affordable. And between the two, you will be a runaway success. And that's where I hope every startup in our community goes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Fantastic job. Okay. So I think another big part of any startup is making sure that for the founders, right, or the co-founders in some situations, that they recognize that the culture is going to grow no matter what. Your culture of your organization is going to grow. The key is building a path where you can cultivate and curate the culture into the healthy, happy, financially successful version that you want it to be. So part of that is the core values, part of that is knowing the purpose, part of that is knowing the product, getting the right people in the right role. But another big piece of that is creating an environment that's psychologically safe. So when I say culture, I'm referring to the thoughts, the values, the beliefs, the behaviors, the unwritten rules of every single organization, right? We need to make sure we're curating that, bringing in the right people so that it's growing the way we want it to, and our company can be successful. So how do we make it psychologically safe? Well, when I say psychologically safe, what I'm referring to is every team member feels safe enough to bring up if something's going to work, not going to work, they have a question, they don't understand something, right? Think about when you were in elementary school and the teacher would say, does anybody have any questions? And you raise your hand, that's psychologically safe. You feel safe enough to ask that question. And that can translate into the business world as well. Do we feel safe enough to take risks, which are super important when we're first starting out? So I'd like to hear from both of you experiences that you've had with psychological safety or the behaviors that might tie into that, or what it looks like maybe if that's not there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it is very, very important to create that safe environment. I think there are two ways to do that. Now, how do we make somebody psychologically safe? There are several factors that affect it, right? Internal, external, economic, political. That you're walking down and you're hearing news and you're thinking, okay, I heard something. I've got to do something about it, but it may or may not be directly related to the work or the company's mission. And you're like, okay, how do we make sure that we have a healthy discussion on it? The other way to do that is the art of recognition. One of the things that our company is really working on is developing that recognition, is a peer-to-peer recognition. Even in a startup role, in large companies, you got these large award ceremonies where selected people who hit the milestones, are celebrated. In a startup, we're all, we're all like a family, right? We're very closely knit. We move around the water cooler. We talk to each other. Our CEO is competing with us in Halloween costume contest and a lot of other things. You don't get that in large companies. In a sense, here, sometimes it's also safe to kind of keep that boundary, where it's like, okay, when it comes to work, you got to focus on the problem and how to solve it. But then recognition, having that free recognition to like, okay, that might have been a failure, something didn't work right, but I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm going to put things in motion to solve that problem and move forward. But hey, in that whole thing, how you handled yourself or you did something, that was actually pretty cool. So, throw away everything that you did wrong. As a leader, I think the one thing you did right, hold on to it. And that recognition actually goes a long way, where the person who's now is affected by the failure is now taking that positive vibe into the next step to solve the problem. And that's hard in a startup, which is usually always affected by tight timelines, changing environments, changing markets, usually very, very hard. And conscientiously, we are trying to keep that going. And that's the only way to keep that trust and the team building continuing to function well for startups.
We talk of fear. Fear is a very, very strong influencer of all decisions in our lives. And there used to be either a movie or a book, I forget which, I'm sure it's not just my imagination, but it was fear is the key. And there is an industry that thrives on it. Anyone wants to say what that industry is? Fear is the key. Insurance. Insurance is the one industry where we spend tens of thousands, if you're old enough like me, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and every day my prayer is, oh my God, let this investment never yield results. I do not want to enjoy the benefits of insurance because that's going to have a lot of pain and sorrow. Now, when you have a startup, it's a little different. You want to be very, very sure that the founders need to be clear and conscious, cognizant of the risks and protect the organization. But as you rightly pointed out, you have to have a clear line between work and rewards. You do not want fear to cramp the operational style, because if I believe my boss is going to fire me because I failed, do you think I will ever stretch myself, get out of my safety zone and do something, taking a risk? I'm not exactly stupid. I got a wife and kids who are 3 and 5. I cannot afford not to be employed. I will not take any risk. And our worthy employer is throwing his money away, investing in me and not getting any outcome. So what the founders need to say is this: you make a mistake, I'll actually send you out for dinner with your wife and family, your parents, whoever. Because you made a mistake in the interest of promoting our company, not my company, our company, and that is what I want you to do. Not make mistakes, but have the courage to do what you believe in. If you have the slightest doubt, come, let's brainstorm, let's talk about it. But I will not take ownership. Just because we brainstorm tomorrow, fail, boss, you approved it. No, I'm not approving anything. I'm just being provocative, asking you questions, making you stronger, building you, making your idea more robust, but you take ownership. You fail or succeed, it does not matter, but commit to it, work hard and do well. That's the kind of environment we want to produce, we want to provide. And I've been much into recruiting, and I never ever hire anybody because of what they have done or what they know. Because whatever you have done most probably is obsolete. And what you know will be obsolete in the next 2 years, particularly when you're in the technology space. What I recruit people for is your attitude, for your willingness to learn. And to me, this became most evident about 25 years ago when I was recruiting people for Y2K resolutions, problem solving. I'm not an engineer, leave alone a software engineer. I know nothing about it. But after interviewing 15, 20 candidates, I could pass off an interview with reasonable confidence. So it's not that difficult to learn the jargon and the words. And you get your hands dirty, you learn the technology very quickly. But if you don't have the attitude to learn, and you think, oh my God, this old foggy guy said, what is, I know it all, you're not the kind of person we are going to hire. So any enterprise which is going into startup mode, please get a good, high-quality recruiter. Get the things clearly understood, and do not think for a moment that because you have an idea and you had the guts or the financial wherewithal to get into it, you can recruit people. Recruiting is extremely talented skill, and you need the right people to do it.
Absolutely. Fantastic thoughts and perspectives. Excellent job. When you're talking about recruiting, it reminded me of just a super fun fact, which is right now in 2025, we have 5 generations in the workforce right now, which is the most amount of generations we've ever had working together. And each one has different intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Each one has their own language. I know we were talking about language earlier before the panel. So for you two, I'm interested to know your thoughts and perspectives on how do we recruit for talking about the right people in the right role, and how do we coach in a startup environment the 5 different generations that we have right now?
Oh yeah, I mean, that is something that is also one of the biggest startup mistakes that people end up doing that can really derail. I mean, I can't emphasize enough what importance teams do to, as to any founder, any any group leader to get to the process of the product. Usually, when a hiring manager is looking at a role to be filled, they're looking at the function that is being filled. They're looking at somebody who can do this, but they also want to see all the other things. But if you're fantastic in filling that role, because that is the immediate need for the startup, they're like, okay, you can do this particular role very well. You can do the other things, great. But how the interview goes is also a reason why that can change. Like I've done interviews. Have been hiring since I transitioned into a leader for a long time. And when I hire, obviously, in an interview, you're selling the company as much as the person who's interviewing selling themselves, in a sense where I'm talking about all the possibilities. And what happens is that also creates an environment where the person who's coming in to fill a particular role is actually coming in to learn and develop their skill set in something else. And that can eventually lead to problems where I'm trying to force them to, but you can do this job. Like, why don't we get this done? And, let's move forward. And then, obviously as this is done and the startup's growing, you can expand. That's something that is not obvious, especially, again, generation-wise, right? There are some who wants to just have it all. And then there are some who wants to just basically, okay, this is what I can do. This is what I want to do. I don't want to push my boundaries. I want to keep going. The coaching towards that, there is no way you can centralize it. There's no one equation that solves the problem. It's like raising a child. I mean, yeah, I can look at 200 videos on YouTube on how to raise a child, but my son's going to teach me what he needs. So it's the same thing. It's listening. I think that's the end of the thing, is listening to the team, listening to the members of the team, because what they say collectively as a group is addressing a problem that they're facing collectively. But then what I found out is talking to each one of them, I find out there are other problems that each one of them have. And it's fascinating that some of them actually completely converse to another person's problem. Like one of them is saying, the example, I was on a check-in, one of them said, I talk too much. And I was like, okay, that's fair. I mean, I love to talk. And then I said, okay, I'm going to try to curtail myself. And then for the next month, I was just like, okay, asking questions, trying to guide the discussion, limiting my conversation. And then I had a check-in with another person who said, man, I don't hear your voice at all. And that's a problem for me. I can't get my things done. And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? I think listening to them, trying to build your own tool set, that's where I feel like coming to leadership conferences, talking to a lot of well-established leaders in the field, learning as much as like what are the different tool sets, and then creating your own equation for each of your employee. And it's easier in a startup than in a larger organization where you're just probably creating a corporate policy and then enforcing it. But here in a startup, I think it is necessary. You cannot create a corporate policy and expect it to hold for the 10 employees. You got to have a self-remediated solution that drives each one of them in the positive manner, because the expectations on them is also a lot more in a resource-limited, very, very price or goal-focused environment.
Awesome. I have a quick question for anyone who can try and answer. Do you know why manholes on the street are round? Why do they have round manholes? You know what I mean? Manhole people go down to make sure the rainwater flows properly and all of that. Do you know why they are round? Okay. Sorry? Yes. The answer is this. Any other shape, the cover could fall in, and if there is a worker, he or she could lose their head. Literally be decapitated. Because it's a metal cover, you're in the hole and the thing falls, boom, you're dead. The round cover will never ever fall into the round hole. It just won't. That's a safety requirement. And the reason I mention this is the common failure in startups is you put square pegs in round holes, and that doesn't work. It just will not work. It's guaranteed to fail. So you need to recruit your people based on the function. You want accounting and finance, you want a very strong, compliant person who will make sure you follow every rule in the book, you don't get caught by the IRS or anybody else for violations. Your investors say, wow, my money is in his hands, it's safe. You want to have that confidence so that more people come and invest. But if the marketing guy has the accounting mindset and doesn't go outside, you'll have no sales at all. So you want to be sure that person is selling with truth and confidence, not with BS that the delivery people will not be able to deliver on, which is often a problem. The delivery people have to be people with innovation. Their mind has to be constantly innovating. They have no barriers in where their imagination goes, and that's how they create value, finding solutions. But what is the problem you have? That you better find out from your potential buyers, users, clients, use cases, because you can find the most wonderful solution, but if there's no one to buy it, you just blew all the money and nothing is going to come out of it. So this is where any startup, when you get the bright idea, the first thing you do, find him and say, boss, will you be an advisor to me? Counsel me. Let me run my ideas by you. Brainstorm with me, and then I'll take it forward. This is critical, and this is where there are some universities which offer environments, they offer incubation centers, some level of counseling, guidance, and so on. So this is something every startup should definitely try to do. They don't want to get so hung up that they don't even fly, but when they fly, they want to be sure their wings are strong and they won't crash land in 2 minutes and die. This is something which is not necessarily done, because quite often the startup, the idea comes and it depends how deep your pockets are, your family pockets are. I have somebody who's been doing something for 5 years. Very interesting space. But they still don't have one revenue giving client. They've just signed a contract with a university, it's going to happen. I think it's wonderful to be dedicated, but you need to be a little more judicious on how long you give yourself to do some things. And if there are any employees here, you probably won't like this advice. But if you don't have the resources, you have to make a compromise, work 80 hours a week, 40 to put food on the table, and another 40 or maybe 50 to pursue your dreams. You have to be creative and make sure that you do not compromise the basic stability of your home, because that would be the death of your dream guaranteed. So to be a founder is not easy. To have a co-founder is more difficult, because at least when you're all by yourself, hey, you have no one to blame, it's whatever you are. Very good friends of mine who worked, as you pointed out, for a large corporation, one of the greatest, the best corporations in the world. What the hell, I'll tell you, IBM. They work for IBM. And in IBM, you have layers. He's the big chief. He will never fail because he's got 3 people below him. All of them have to fail before he fails. So he's built redundancy. His safety is guaranteed. He can come to conferences like this, have a good time, go back, while his team is working. That, unfortunately, is not the startup environment. So these 2 good friends who worked with major mortgage company, spun out, started their own company, did very well. And after 3 years, they stopped talking to each other. They stopped socializing, even though they used to go, they had various cultural, religious things you do it. You know why? Because one guy felt like, hell, I am doing all the sales, I am bringing all the revenue, and Johnny here is just there looking the newspaper and going out and doing this and that, and we share the rewards equally. And I had to kind of tell them how to modify by roles and say each one gets compensated for their roles. And then the final surplus, they made the mistake of being equal founders. Tough luck, you got to share it equally. But you're the sales guy, you take 15% right off the top because you brought the business, whatever number you agree to. You're managing the delivery people, account management, everything, PMO, whatever. For each function, you take your percentages out, and then you do the rest of it. So unless you do that, as the good Lord said, if you start doing business with your family member or friend, your business will fail, and you'll also lose your family member or friend. So you have to be, hey, whom can I trust more than my wife if I'm getting into a business? Any of you have any answers? Can I trust any of you more than my wife? But if I work with him and I fail, at least my personal life is not messed up. And my wife is still working and put food on the table. You don't put all eggs in one basket. So there are things you need to know. You need common sense. Passion, excitement, creativity is all wonderful. But without a little bit of hard common sense and being prudent in your life management, things are unlikely to fail. If you're like Bill Gates, 21 years old, you're reasonably affluent parents, you're not on poverty lane, you drop out of Harvard, it's okay. You'll find your roots. But for most of us, that's not the good fortune we are born into and grow up. So you need to seek mentors, advisors, build a strong foundation, and then fly.
And just in case, for anyone who's been joining us since the last 5-10 minutes, whenever he pointed at me, he wasn't exactly talking about me. He was just using me as a tool to give an example. So
Sorry about the need for the disclaimer.
Great job. Great answers. I'm not sure how we are on time. How much time do we have left? Some time. Okay, perfect. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Okay, you talked about, the startup. So the startup is starting up and it's going along. So most startups, they go along and then you have another chasm that you have to cross. So how do you deal with it at that particular time when the people that got you from point A to point B are not going to be the people that take you from B to C?
I think it's a great point. What got us here is not going to be what gets us there, right? So I would lean into kind of like what we've been talking about is making sure that we have clear expectations, we have a clear purpose and vision, we have the right people in the right roles, and we're trusting the people that we put into those roles to help us move forward. And sometimes that means bringing someone else in, and sometimes that means changing perspective and saying, if this isn't the way it's going to work and the answer here is no, how else can I make this work, right? But I will also defer to you too.
yeah, no, that's perfect. I think if the purpose and the mission and the vision is already out there, it's clear to the leadership, right? As the leadership grows, I think the goal is, I read it somewhere where it's a lot better, in terms of the rate of growth. I'm an engineer, so I love those mathematical terms. The rate of growth for a startup from A to B can significantly increase from B to C if we have done a good enough job to train the people who took us from A to B to strive through all the different things. They are the best leaders now to kind of bring in the next amount of change where we don't have to go back and retrain leaders or revision people coming from outside. And that's where it's like when at the right time, and that's part of the leadership requirements. Like we have management meetings where we talk about this all the time, is to kind of say, okay, we are reaching this point. Let's take stock of what's going on, who can really help us move things forward. And for those who are not there yet, how can we train them? How can we prep them, prepare them for what's moving forward? And how do we fill that gap in a sense that, okay, yes, with even all of these are some of the people, and fill them up in complementary roles that actually help move things forward without a lot of change. Because transitioning change in a startup is not something as common as one would think. Some people don't take it very well, especially and I've had situations where like a boss leaves because they're like awesome with a startup. Now the excitement isn't there. Now it's transitioning into a manufacturing organization. Now would you take the best candidate from the team and start transitioning them to a leader, or you bring in a new director or a boss to fill the role and then have to get the vision together? I think there's a lot of benefit in internal training and getting the team to grow. rather than to get somebody from outside. But again, it changes with the situation. So it's taking stock on a continuous basis.
See, I alluded to this earlier when we spoke that, as you said, what got you from point A to B will not necessarily get you to C. And A to B is your product idea, you develop product, service, whatever it is, you developed it. But then you need to take it to the market. The skills you need are totally different. So that's when you bring the right person. And during the A to B journey is when you're shopping around to find who is the person who can take me from B to C. Definitely not anybody who is already in your A to B journey, because then you're wasting your money on a marketing person who has nothing to do. So it's very timely recruitment of whomever you want, and that is extremely critical. And that is what people often don't necessarily think of. And how do you get people at the appropriate time? And that's where the vision is wonderful. But you do need to put an action item list of saying when you do what you do and have it validated and strictly follow, but be flexible enough to move around as needed. Otherwise, things won't work. Back about 25 years ago, there was this startup. And that's when you could get money. And as long as you lose money every quarter, somebody will give you more money. Investors, your valuation of your company is dependent on how much money you lost in the last quarter. I'm not making this up, I promise. There was this company, it was called US Interactive. They bought my company. We were a $25 million company. They bought us for I'm glad everybody is sitting, nobody's standing. Oh, you two be careful, I don't want you to fall. For $380 million. $25 million company, out of which 280 was in stock, paper, they just wrote it and gave it to us. 100 million was cash component, of which 20 million they gave us. Other 80 million was a note. And the founder said, oh my God, we are rich. Aren't we the best? We are the most geniuses in the world. What happened a year later? They had to raise money. They said, wait a minute. You have $80 million in debt at you, your note is discharged. So you raise money from me and pay them. How is it going to help our growth? I helped the company file out of bankruptcy, get out of bankruptcy. So my $25 million company got sold for 20 million cash, and that was it. So a lot of these things happen out of ignorance, and I hate to say it, greed, but reality is greed, and you cannot lose contact with reality. Have your head on the ground, not up in the stars, because if it's up in the stars, in the clouds, very likely you will crash and have a miserable death. And that's what happened to my company.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Anything else you'd like to talk about? Yes.
You talked about listening to your teams and taking direction from your teams. In my world, which is a startup in med device, if I would have taken that approach, I would have a company right now. I had to actually lead them to get them to where I wanted to go. So how do you determine when you push through common ideas or when you actually
See, this is a function of whom you bring into your teams. And there has to be extreme caution in this. And there has been coffin, I want to get married, and the first 2 minutes, come on, let's get married. That's kind of stupid. And in a startup environment, it's the same thing. It's entering a path of uncertainty. You need to be extremely cautious whom you're going to bed with. Very, very careful. And also, you have to keep in one mind very, very strong, which might slightly disagree with what you started when you asked the question, which is, if you are the smartest person in the room, guess what? You're in the wrong room. And the best, most powerful voice supporting this is someone whom I miss often. Most people can't live today without him, and that's Steve Jobs. He said a simple thing. I don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. I hire smart people so they can tell me what I should do. But the underlying word is smart. So you need to know whom you're recruiting. So anybody recruiting, please don't be the sole judge. Get up front, get your job description, make sure whom you recruit in what position. Now, if you're recruiting a CFO, a VP people, or HR, you better make sure they are better than you are so that they add value to your company. But you're hiring somebody to write software code, you're not the person to do that. First, you hire the software architect, project manager, let them do the hiring of the people because they are going to be accountable to you to deliver. As far as direction is concerned, share it up front. This is what I want to do. If you agree with this, come join me. I welcome you. If not, we'll keep in touch. I don't want to hire you just now. So that clarity, setting expectations, setting boundaries is the core to success, not just in startups, but in every aspect of your life. Set expectations and draw boundaries, and please share it. I can't read your mind.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it just comes down to when somebody says, like, talk to your team, obviously the assumption that's made is the team that you're talking to is the team of rock stars in your company. These are people you trust. These are people who are smart. They understand you, like they know the language, right? And what you're talking to them is not what the direction necessarily is next, is to say, okay, this is our goal. This is our objective, right? We're trying to hit this. Now, if you ask me, I know a way to handle this problem and solve it and move it forward. And of course, you being the smart, a very, very smart person, implemented it and became successful for you, which is really kudos to you. But then there are several places where there might be another way to do the job, and there might be another person in the team who might be like, you know what, I know what you're telling me to do, but if we go this way, we might have a team or a couple of people who are going to be disgruntled, who's going to be unhappy, who's going to make things difficult for you. There's a risk associated with it. There's an impact associated with it. Now, listening to them will allow you, for a smarter person, to kind of say, okay, if that is a risk and there's an impact associated with it, how do we solve that problem? Maybe, how do we position somebody in that role to kind of mitigate it more proactively than to go on completely and then handle it retroactively and then have your team kind of say, I wish this person talked to me. Like, I would have told this person that this problem is coming, right? And that's what, it's not so much as to kind of say, when we say listening to the teams, it's not so much to say, okay, guys, we have this, what do we do next? It's more of targeted conversations to kind of influence their thought process. And by doing that, it's also, you're not only, yeah, agreed, you might talk to them and you might find every idea they give is wrong, right? In which case, this is an opportunity for you to train them in the right manner so that maybe the next time you talk to them, they probably, at least a couple of them, give you the right answer. Then you know where your team's going. You know you're setting the next set of leaders in your team to be ready to take up some of that accountability and responsibility. And that's a one thing that I have seen personally is if I am the one who's telling members of the team to do something, the accountability and the responsibility lies completely on me. It's expecting them to take that unless they have the buy-off. I would be very happy if somebody's achieved it and can help me understand how to do that. But then what I've consistently seen is, well, you told me to do it this way, I did it. Win or lose, you take the hit, right? And that's something that is very hard, where I can't expect them to go the extra mile because they're just doing exactly what I told them to do. And that's where the talking comes in. You're getting their buy-off. You're getting their understanding. They're now slowly transitioning the accountability to them, where you're saying, okay, we talked about it. You understood. Now the goal is for you to implement it. So now it's on you. So now you tell me if you got a problem, but you're going to get me successful. And that, one night you can sleep.
See, this is the fundamental lesson of accountability, of delegation. You can only delegate responsibility. You cannot delegate accountability. And that is something every leader needs to keep in mind. And that's where you need to draw boundaries on where the buck stops. If the buck stops with me, I can never delegate accountability. And that is something every founder, co-founder needs to keep in mind.
100%. Fantastic job. We have time for one more question. Go for it.
Well, sorry, I missed the question, but I'm sure you've given value. I don't know whether the next speaker has come or not, but the note I got is that we have another panel shortly, and I was invited to be a moderator or panelist on it. So I'm not sure what is the next program.
You did it to yourself.
Sure. Oh, I'm pleased. You know, I'm always a very firm believer of two things. One is the reward for hard work, good work, is more work. And I'm okay for that. Second is I believe in my life there are absolutely no coincidences. Everything is providential. By virtue of being for the next panel, I'll get to meet some more wonderful people, and I will learn. I will learn from everybody, every opportunity. So I count it as a blessing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.